The crystalline walls of the sanguine dungeons refracted light in patterns that seemed designed to disorient prisoners, creating an environment where time became meaningless and hope died by degrees. Captain Daniel Cross had been conscious for what felt like hours or days, his military chronometer having been removed along with everything else that might help him maintain connection to the human world above. He wasn't alone in the dungeons. Through the translucent barriers, he could see other human prisoners, soldiers from the failed invasion fleet, civilians captured during the evacuation of contested worlds, researchers who had been studying sanguine biology until they became specimens themselves. What disturbed him most wasn't their presence, but their condition, pale, listless, bearing the telltale marks of regular feeding that kept them alive but drained them of vitality. The Sanguine Empire had perfected the art of sustainable predation. Their human prisoners were maintained at optimal health for blood production, fed adequately, exercised sufficiently, and bled systematically to provide nourishment for the vampire nobility without causing permanent damage. It was efficient, humane by their standards, and absolutely horrifying to anyone who understood what it meant to be reduced to livestock. Daniel's cell was different. Isolated from the others, equipped with amenities that suggested someone important would be visiting, and monitored by guards who watched him with the intensity of people expecting something significant to happen. He'd been trying to puzzle out why his accommodations differed when the air in his cell changed, became charged with presence that made his survival instincts scream warnings. Queen Lyralii entered his cell like darkness given form, her movement so fluid it seemed to defy physics. She was exactly as terrifying as intelligence reports had described, but the briefings hadn't captured the alien beauty that made her inhuman nature both obvious and compelling. Her ears curved gracefully to elegant points that spoke of evolutionary refinement, while her eyes held depths of intelligence accumulated over centuries of existence. "Captain Daniel Cross," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. 3rd Battalion, Terran Defense Forces. Age 32, from the agricultural colony of New Kansas. No living family, no romantic attachments, excellent service record marred by a tendency to take unnecessary risks to protect subordinates. Daniel met her gaze with the defiance expected of a career military officer. "Your Majesty. I assume you're here to evaluate your newest food source." Something flickered across her expression, surprise, perhaps, at his directness. "Your file makes for interesting reading, Captain. But files don't capture." She moved closer, and Daniel caught his breath as her nostrils flared slightly. "They don't capture scent." The change in her demeanor was immediate and profound. Queen Lyralii, who had entered his cell with the casual confidence of an apex predator, suddenly went very still. Her luminescent eyes widened, their glow shifting from cold assessment to something that looked almost like shock. "What is this?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Daniel watched in fascination as the most feared ruler in known space took another step closer, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. Her hands, which moments before had been steady with centuries of practiced control, began to tremble. "Your Majesty." She didn't seem to hear him. Instead, she drew nearer, close enough that he could see the conflict playing across her alien features, hunger warring with something else, something that seemed to frighten her more than any enemy she'd faced in 3 centuries of rule. "Your blood," she said, her voice barely audible. "The scent of it." Daniel felt his pulse quicken, which only seemed to intensify whatever was affecting her. Queen Lyralii's eyes began to glow brighter, but instead of the predatory light he expected, they held confusion, recognition, and something that might have been longing. "It calls to me," she continued, reaching toward him with movements that seemed involuntary. "But not like the others. Not like." She stopped herself, her hand hovering inches from his face. "This is impossible." "What's impossible?" Queen Lyralii looked at him then, really looked at him, with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing through to his soul. Her alien features held an expression he couldn't interpret, but her next words carried weight that suggested she was asking a question that had been haunting her for far longer than the duration of his captivity. "Is it you?" she whispered. Daniel stared back at her, trying to understand what she was asking. Is what me, your majesty? But she was already backing away, her royal composure reasserting itself even as her eyes remained locked on his with an intensity that suggested she'd found something she hadn't expected to find, and wasn't sure whether to be terrified or relieved. "Guard," she called, her voice once again carrying the authority of absolute rule. "This prisoner is not to be fed upon by anyone without my direct permission. He is to be kept in optimal health and provided with whatever accommodations he requires." "Your Majesty," one of the guards ventured carefully, "the feeding schedule for human prisoners does not apply to this one." Queen Lyraliai's tone brooked no argument. "This prisoner is under my personal protection." As she moved toward the cell entrance, she glanced back at Daniel one more time, and he caught a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath the regal mask. Uncertainty, hope, and fear all warring in her luminescent gaze. "I will return tomorrow, Captain Cross. We have much to discuss." After she left, Daniel sat in his upgraded cell trying to process what had just happened. The most powerful vampire in the galaxy had entered his prison intending to evaluate him as a food source and instead had reacted like someone encountering a long-lost, what? Friend? Enemy? Something else entirely? Her question echoed in his mind, "Is it you?" As if she'd been searching for him specifically, across years or decades or centuries, and had finally found what she was looking for in the most unlikely of circumstances. Daniel stared at the crystalline walls of his prison, wondering if his capture had been less random than he'd assumed, and whether his blood held secrets that neither he nor his captors fully understood. Outside his cell, he could hear the whispered conversations of guards trying to make sense of their queen's unprecedented behavior, and Daniel realized that his fate had become entangled with mysteries much larger and more dangerous than simple survival as a prisoner of war. Queen Lyraliai's daily visits to Daniel's cell became the subject of increasingly bold speculation throughout the Sanguine Court, where 3 centuries of predictable routine had given way to behavior no one could explain or precedent could justify. The vampire nobility whispered about their queen's obsession with a single human prisoner, while Daniel found himself caught between fascination and frustration as their conversations revealed depths to his captor that intelligence briefings had never suggested. "The ancient texts speak of connections that transcend simple predation," she said during their 5th meeting, her luminescent eyes focused on him with an intensity that seemed to pierce through to his soul. "Bonds that offer sustenance beyond mere blood consumption." "You mean the prophecies your scholars keep researching?" Daniel had learned to recognize the signs of her internal struggle. The way her hands trembled when she drew near, the flickering of her alien eyes when his scent reached her, the careful distance she maintained despite obvious desire to come closer. "You know about the research?" Hard to miss the parade of dusty academics visiting my cell to measure my pulse and analyze my breathing patterns. Daniel leaned forward, noting how she instinctively leaned back to maintain the space between them. "What exactly are they looking for, Your Majesty?" Queen Lyraliai was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions that seemed to war with each other. "Evidence of something most of my people consider mythology. A connection that allows vampires to feed through willing partnership rather than predatory consumption. Soul bonding." Her sharp intake of breath suggested he'd hit upon something significant. "You know the term. Your scholars aren't as discreet as they think they are. They've been comparing my physiological responses to descriptions in your ancient texts." Daniel studied her face, trying to read expressions that were both alien and becoming increasingly familiar. "The question is whether you believe in these prophecies, or you're just curious about an unusual prisoner. I have ruled for 3 centuries, Captain Cross. I have seen empires rise and fall, witnessed the birth of civilizations and the extinction of entire species. I do not believe in mythology." She paused, her gaze dropping to his throat where his pulse was visible. "But I cannot explain what happens when I am near you." "What does happen?" Queen Lyraliai moved closer, the closest she had ever come during their meetings, and Daniel felt the air between them charged with energy that made his skin tingle and his heart race. Her breathing became shallow as she approached, her luminescent eyes beginning to glow brighter. "I hunger for your blood as I have never hungered before," she said quietly. The scent of it overwhelms every instinct I possess, calls to me with intensity that borders on madness. But when I attempt to feed... She reached toward his throat, her fingers stopping just short of contact. Daniel could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could see the way her hands shook with the effort of restraint. When I attempt to feed, she continued, her voice barely a whisper, something prevents me. Not fear, not conscience, but something deeper. As if your blood is meant for me, but not in the way I have taken sustenance for centuries. Daniel made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. Then take it. Her eyes widened in shock. What? You said the prophecies speak of willing partnership. I'm willing. Take my blood and see what happens. Captain, you don't understand what you're offering. The feeding process. I understand that you've protected me when you could have killed me, that you've treated me with respect when you could have treated me like livestock, and that whatever's happening between us might be important enough to take risks for. Daniel met her luminescent gaze steadily. I'm offering freely what you've never taken by force. Queen Lyralii stared at him for a long moment, her alien features cycling through expressions of desire, fear, hope, and something that might have been recognition. Finally, she nodded. If you're certain. I'm certain. She moved with fluid grace, positioning herself beside him on the crystalline bench that served as his bed. Her proximity made his pulse race even faster, which seemed to affect her like a drug. Her eyes glowed brighter, her breathing became more rapid, and her composure cracked to reveal something almost vulnerable beneath the regal mask. Give me your wrist, she said softly. Daniel extended his arm, watching as she cradled it gently in hands that trembled with barely contained hunger. Her touch was surprisingly warm, and when she looked up to meet his eyes one more time, he saw something that looked like gratitude. This may hurt, she warned. I know. Queen Lyralii lowered her head to his wrist, her alien ears twitching as she positioned herself to feed. Daniel braced himself for pain, but when her fangs pierced his skin, the sensation was unlike anything he'd expected. Instead of agony, he felt warmth spreading through his bloodstream. Instead of weakness, he felt an odd kind of strength that seemed to flow between them. And instead of the predatory consumption described in military briefings, he experienced something that felt almost like sharing, as if his blood was nourishing not just her body but something deeper. Queen Lyralii's reaction was even more dramatic. The moment his blood touched her lips, her entire body went rigid with shock. Her luminescent eyes blazed with light so intense it filled the cell, and she made a sound that was part gasp, part cry of recognition. When she lifted her head, her expression held wonder, confusion, and something that looked very much like joy. Impossible, she breathed. What? I can taste your memories, your emotions, your... She stared at him with an expression of absolute amazement. Your soul. This isn't feeding, Captain Cross. This is... What? Connection. True connection, such as the prophecies described but I never believed possible. Her voice carried harmonics of awe that made the crystalline walls ring softly. You are the resonance. Daniel felt dizzy, though whether from blood loss or from the intensity of whatever had just passed between them, he couldn't tell. The what? The resonance. The connection that allows vampires to transcend our predatory nature and find sustenance through partnership rather than consumption. Queen Lyralii's expression held depths of emotion he couldn't fully interpret. I have been searching for this connection for over 50 years, Captain Cross. And I found it in the blood of a human prisoner captured during a war between our peoples. Is that why I was captured? Because you were searching for this, resonance? Her silence was answer enough. Daniel stared at the vampire queen whose feeding had left him feeling more energized rather than drained, trying to process implications that extended far beyond his personal survival. What happens now? Now, Queen Lyralii said quietly, we discover whether the connection we've found is strong enough to survive the political storm it's about to create. Outside the cell, Daniel could already hear the raised voices of vampire nobles demanding audiences with their queen, and he realized that his willing participation in something the Sanguine considered mythological was about to make him the center of attention he definitely didn't want. The Sanguine court erupted into barely contained chaos as news of Queen Lyraliai's successful soul bonding with a human prisoner spread through whispered conversations that challenged 3 centuries of established tradition. Lord Calethorn, whose political ambitions had been held in check only by Lyraliai's unshakable authority, seized upon the unprecedented situation to question not just her judgment but her fitness to rule. "You have compromised yourself with a human," he declared during the emergency council session that Daniel could hear from his cell through the crystalline walls. "Whatever delusion you've embraced regarding ancient prophecies, the reality is that you have formed an attachment to our enemy that undermines your ability to lead." Queen Lyraliai's response carried the kind of controlled fury that had kept challenges to her authority rare and brief. "I have discovered a connection that could revolutionize our relationship with other species, Lord Calethorn. The soul bond offers sustainable nourishment without the predatory consumption that limits our civilization's growth. You speak of revolution as if it were desirable. The Sanguine Empire has prospered for millennia through proven methods. Why abandon success for experimental connection with inferior species?" Daniel pressed closer to the wall, straining to hear the debate that would determine not just his fate but the future of vampire-human relations. The other council members' voices created a background of concerned murmurs that suggested Queen Lyraliai's support wasn't as solid as her centuries of rule had suggested. "Because, my lords," came Lyraliai's voice, clear and strong despite the opposition, "evolution requires adaptation. The soul bond doesn't diminish our strength, it enhances it. Captain Cross's willing participation has provided me with nourishment that surpasses anything I have experienced through traditional feeding." "Heresy," Lord Calethorn declared. "You have allowed attachment to cloud your judgment. This human has corrupted your understanding of our fundamental nature." The argument continued for hours, with Daniel learning more about Sanguine politics than any human intelligence agency had ever discovered. Queen Lyraliai faced a coalition of traditionalists who viewed any departure from predatory norms as existential threat to their species' identity, while a smaller faction of progressives cautiously supported exploration of alternatives to their current limitations. When she finally returned to his cell, Queen Lyraliai looked exhausted in ways that went beyond physical fatigue. "Rough meeting?" Daniel asked. 3 centuries of unchallenged authority, undone by a single human prisoner. Her attempt at humor couldn't hide the strain in her voice. "Lord Calethorn is demanding proof that the soul bond benefits our people rather than weakening our queen." "What kind of proof?" "Demonstration that our connection offers practical advantages beyond personal satisfaction. Evidence that soul bonding could be replicated with other humans to create sustainable partnerships rather than predatory relationships." Daniel studied her expression, noting the way exhaustion had stripped away some of her royal composure to reveal the person beneath. "And if you can't provide that proof? Then I face formal challenge to my rule, with the outcome determining whether our connection survives or whether you become a sacrifice to appease traditionalist concerns about my fitness to lead." "How long do we have?" 3 days. Lord Calethorn has invoked the ancient rights of succession challenge. If I cannot demonstrate that my actions serve the Empire rather than personal desire, the Council will vote on my continued leadership. Daniel felt anger rise at the thought of Queen Lyraliai losing her throne because she'd chosen cooperation over consumption. "What can I do to help?" Her smile held warmth that transformed her alien features into something beautiful rather than merely striking. "You've already done more than you know, Captain Cross. The soul bond we share has given me strength and clarity I hadn't realized I was lacking. The question is whether that strength is enough to face what's coming." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Velnara, the court's senior scholar, whose research into ancient texts had provided the theoretical framework for understanding their connection. "Your Majesty," she announced, her excitement barely contained, "I believe I have discovered something significant in the earliest prophecies." "What have you found?" "References to the joining of worlds through willing sacrifice and mutual strength. The text suggests that soul bonding was intended not as rare anomaly but as evolutionary step toward cooperation between species. Queen Lyralii leaned forward with interest. Explain. The prophecies describe soul-bonded pairs as bridges between civilizations, capable of understanding and communicating in ways that transcend normal diplomatic relations. They were meant to be ambassadors of a sort, facilitating cooperation where traditional approaches failed. Daniel felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. My capture wasn't random, was it? You've been searching for humans with compatible genetics for years. Queen Lyralii's expression confirmed his suspicion. Sanguine Intelligence has been monitoring human populations for genetic markers that suggested soul bonding potential. Your military record, combined with your genetic profile, indicated exceptional compatibility. So this whole war was partly designed to bring potential candidates into our territory where compatibility could be tested. Her voice carried guilt that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the methods that had brought them together. I did not expect to find what I found in you, Captain Cross. The connection we share goes far beyond what the prophecies described. Dr. Velnara consulted her ancient texts with growing excitement. Your Majesty, if Captain Cross represents successful soul bonding, his presence during the challenge could demonstrate practical applications that Lord Calethorn cannot dismiss as personal weakness. What do you mean? The texts describe soul-bonded pairs as capable of tactical coordination that neither species could achieve independently. Human strategic thinking combined with sanguine abilities through shared consciousness. Daniel felt a chill as he realized the implications. You want to use our connection as a weapon? Not as a weapon, Queen Lyralii corrected. As proof that cooperation offers advantages that domination cannot provide. If we can demonstrate capabilities that benefit both our species, then you can justify our bond as political necessity rather than personal attachment. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the logic even as he recognized the dangers. What exactly would this demonstration involve? Lord Calethorn's challenge will likely include combat trials designed to test my fitness to rule. If our soul bond allows coordination that gives me advantages I lack alone, then you win the challenge and prove that human-vampire partnerships serve the Empire's interests. Daniel met her luminescent gaze steadily. I'm willing to try, Your Majesty. But what happens if we fail? Queen Lyralii's expression grew solemn. Then I lose my throne, Lord Calethorn becomes ruler of the Sanguine Empire, and you become the first sacrifice in his campaign to eliminate human influence from our civilization. Daniel felt the weight of entire civilizations resting on a connection neither of them fully understood. No pressure there. Indeed. Queen Lyralii reached for his hand, and when their skin made contact, Daniel felt the soul bond flare with energy that seemed to strengthen both of them. But Captain Cross, I have spent centuries ruling alone. The prospect of facing this challenge with a partner whose strength complements mine. Yes. For the first time in 3 centuries, I believe we might actually win. Outside, Daniel could hear preparations beginning for the succession challenge that would determine whether their unprecedented connection represented evolution or corruption, and whether love between species could survive the politics of empires built on predation. The succession challenge began at dawn with rituals that had governed sanguine leadership transitions for millennia, but Daniel's presence as Queen Lyralii's soul-bonded partner created precedents that forced ancient ceremonies to accommodate unprecedented circumstances. The great crystal amphitheater filled with vampire nobility whose luminescent eyes reflected both curiosity and concern about witnessing history that could reshape their entire civilization. The challenge of Lord Calethorn against Queen Lyralii will proceed in 3 trials, announced the council elder, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. Combat effectiveness, strategic wisdom, and leadership capability. Victory requires success in at least 2 of the 3 trials. Daniel stood beside Queen Lyralii in the challenger's circle, acutely aware that he was the only human in an amphitheater filled with beings who could kill him without effort. But the soul bond they shared had strengthened over the past 3 days, and he could feel her presence in his mind like a warm current that enhanced his awareness and reflexes beyond normal human limits. My lords, Queen Lyralii addressed the assembled nobility, I present Captain Daniel Cross, not as my prisoner but as my partner. The soul bond we share represents evolution beyond our traditional limitations, offering strength through cooperation rather than domination through predation. Lord Calethorn stepped forward, his expression radiating contempt for what he clearly viewed as corruption of sanguine purity. You present weakness disguised as innovation, your majesty. This human represents dependency that undermines the self-reliance that has made our empire strong. Then prove it, Queen Lyralii replied, her luminescent eyes blazing with challenge. Demonstrate that traditional methods surpass the advantages of willing partnership. The first trial was combat. A test designed to measure a ruler's personal capability to defend their people against physical threats. Lord Calethorn entered the arena with the confidence of someone whose vampire abilities had never been seriously challenged, while Daniel wondered what contribution he could possibly make to a fight between beings whose strength exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude. Stay connected to me, Queen Lyralii whispered as they faced their opponent. Let me feel your tactical awareness, and I'll share my physical capabilities. The moment Lord Calethorn attacked, Daniel experienced sensations he'd never imagined possible. Through the soul bond, he could perceive the battle at vampire speed while contributing strategic analysis at human levels of complexity. Queen Lyralii's movements became extensions of his tactical planning, while her enhanced senses fed him information that allowed prediction of their opponent's attacks before they fully developed. The combination proved devastating. Lord Calethorn found himself facing not just Queen Lyralii's vampire abilities but Daniel's military experience translated through superhuman reflexes and strength. Every feint, every tactical maneuver, every strategic decision flowed between them seamlessly until they moved as a single entity with capabilities that neither species possessed independently. Impossible, Lord Calethorn gasped after Queen Lyralii's coordinated assault left him defeated on the arena floor. No vampire moves with such precision. No vampire moves alone, when they have chosen the right partner, Queen Lyralii replied, helping Daniel to his feet as the amphitheater erupted in amazed murmurs. The second trial tested strategic wisdom through complex scenarios requiring decisions about resource allocation, diplomatic relations, and military planning. Here, Daniel's human perspective proved even more valuable as he provided alternative approaches to problems that vampire thinking had approached from predictably predatory angles. The Altarian trade dispute, presented the Council Elder, requires resolution that maintains sanguine interests while avoiding military confrontation that could destabilize 3-star systems. Lord Calethorn's solution involved traditional intimidation backed by military threats, while Queen Lyralii, guided by Daniel's diplomatic insights, proposed partnership agreements that would benefit all parties through resource sharing rather than domination. The human approach, Lord Calethorn protested, shows weakness that other species will exploit. The human approach, Daniel replied directly, shows strength that other species will respect. Cooperation builds loyalty that lasts longer than fear. The Council's response to their collaborative strategy was unanimous approval. The first time in recorded history that a challenged ruler had won the strategic trial without dissent. The final trial, leadership capability, required demonstration of ability to inspire loyalty and unite diverse factions toward common goals. Lord Calethorn spoke of traditional sanguine virtues, ancient glories, and the importance of maintaining racial purity against corrupting influences. Queen Lyralii chose a different approach. My lords, she said, I ask you to look beyond what we have been and consider what we could become. The soul bond I share with Captain Cross has shown me possibilities I never imagined, sustainable nourishment through willing partnership, strategic advantages through cooperative thinking, and strength that comes from unity rather than dominance. But more than practical benefits, she continued, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the amphitheater, this connection has given me something I didn't know I was missing, companionship. True partnership with someone whose strengths complement mine rather than someone who fears or serves me. Daniel stepped forward, addressing the vampire nobility with more confidence than he felt. Your Majesty has given me more than protection or sustenance. She's given me purpose, partnership, and proof that different species can find common ground through respect rather than conquest. The choice you make today determines whether the Sanguine Empire evolves toward cooperation or remains trapped in predatory limitations that prevent growth. The silence that followed stretched until Lord Calethorn broke it with a scoff of derision. Pretty words from a human who benefits from our queen's weakness. But what happens when other species learn that vampires can be swayed by sentiment? When they discover that our ruler has become dependent on inferior beings? Then they discover that evolution makes us stronger, not weaker, Queen Lyralii replied. The soul bond doesn't diminish my capabilities, it enhances them. Captain Cross doesn't make me dependent, he makes me more effective. The council elder called for the vote that would determine both their fates. Daniel felt the soul bond pulse with Queen Lyralii's tension as the vampire nobility considered centuries of tradition against the evidence of unprecedented capabilities they had just witnessed. Those in favor of maintaining Queen Lyralii's rule. Hands rose throughout the amphitheater, not unanimously, but clearly a majority. The traditionalist faction that supported Lord Calethorn had been swayed by practical demonstrations of enhanced effectiveness that transcended their philosophical objections. The challenge fails, announced the council elder. Queen Lyralii retains her throne, and her partnership receives official recognition as beneficial to the Empire's interests. Lord Calethorn's expression promised that defeat wouldn't end his opposition, but formal challenge had been settled according to ancient law. Daniel felt relief wash through the soul bond as Queen Lyralii's position became secure enough to pursue the revolutionary changes their connection represented. What happens now? Daniel asked as they left the amphitheater amid crowds of vampire nobles whose whispered conversations suggested rapid acceptance of political realities. Now we prove that soul bonding can be replicated with other compatible humans, Queen Lyralii replied. The council has authorized expansion of the program that brought you here, seeking willing participants for partnerships that could transform both our civilizations. Willing participants? No more prisoners, Captain Cross. No more predatory capture. If soul bonding represents evolution, it must be based on choice rather than coercion. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the same crystal amphitheater, but now it hosted a very different kind of ceremony. The first voluntary human participants in the soul bonding program had arrived, diplomats, researchers, and volunteers who had chosen to explore unprecedented connections between species. Do you, Queen Lyralii of the Sanguine Empire, choose this partnership freely and with full understanding of its implications? Asked the ceremonial officiant, whose ancient words had been adapted to accommodate interspecies bonding. I do, Lyralii replied, her luminescent eyes focused on Daniel with love that had grown from desperate necessity into genuine devotion. And do you, Daniel Cross of the Terran Federation, choose this partnership freely and with full understanding of its implications? I do, Daniel said, meaning it completely. Their formal bonding ceremony became the foundation for treaties that established the first peaceful relations between humanity and the Sanguine Empire in generations. Trade agreements replaced military conflicts, cultural exchanges replaced conquest, and partnership programs replaced predatory relationships. Any regrets? Lyralii asked during their private celebration, her question carrying undertones of vulnerability that reminded him of their first encounter in his prison cell. About becoming consort to the most powerful vampire in the galaxy. About helping establish peace between our species. About finding love in the most unlikely circumstances imaginable. Daniel smiled at the woman whose trembling reaction to his blood had changed both their lives. None whatsoever. Even though you'll never be able to return to a normal human life. This is better than normal. This is extraordinary. Daniel took her hands, feeling the soul bond pulse with shared contentment. Besides, normal is overrated when you can have revolutionary instead. Their partnership had proven that the most powerful connections were often those that seemed impossible at first glance, that compatibility could transcend species boundaries when based on mutual respect, understanding, and the courage to abandon limitations in favor of transformative possibilities. The vampire queen whose whispered, "Is it you?" had recognized something neither of them fully understood had found her answer, yes, it had been him. The human prisoner whose blood made her shiver with recognition had been exactly who she'd spent decades searching for across the galaxy. And their love story became the template for a new era of interspecies cooperation, proving that sometimes evolution required abandoning predatory patterns in favor of partnerships that made both sides stronger than they could ever be alone. The Sanguine Empire that had thrived through dominance learned to flourish through cooperation, and the human who had once been prisoner of war became co-ruler of a civilization built on the revolutionary principle that the most powerful bonds were those freely chosen rather than forcibly taken.